Hello everyone, welcome back to Pixel Village and I'm Radhakrishnan. Yes, yet another camera review. Alright, before I start, let me tell you that Pixel Village now has a membership program. So if you're interested in exclusive privileges, including an early access to all the review videos that we do, tutorials of course, please join Pixel Village membership. Click that join button now. It will be a great support to Pixel Village, especially during these times. All right, back to our review. Now, this one is the Panasonic Lumix S5. Well, this is the second Lumix camera that we have received in Pixel Village for a review. The first one was the S1 some time back. Well, we really like the Panasonic Lumix cameras. We reviewed it. We thoroughly enjoyed the whole build quality, the whole experience. We thoroughly enjoyed it. If you have not watched the S1 review, the camera is still out, still very valid camera. Please, I'll add the link in the description. Please click on that and watch. Okay, S5 is the latest one. Of course, it was launched a couple of months back. Lots of people have started using it, and we've been getting regular requests to review the S5, and finally here it is. A little trivia before we start is that I'm sure most of you already know that Panasonic is actually one of the early adopters of mirrorless technology. It was originally invented by Epson way back, but they never pursued it. They were an entirely different business altogether. Panasonic followed it up, Olympus did, and they came up with this Micro Four Third range of cameras, still very valid cameras, extremely capable cameras. And Panasonic, of course, had their, very popular GH series. Now, Panasonic is actually known for the video, professional digital filming and videography. Their Vadicams are legendary. Now, when they created the, still cameras, well, naturally, there were a lot of emphasis were given for filming. So if you notice the GH series cameras, all the GH series in fact had 422 10-bit internal and a slow speed and all that many years back. Well, of course, then the L Alliance happened. Leica, Panasonic and Sigma came together and created this new series. And of course, now this is the fourth camera in that series, a full frame one. Now, let's quickly get into the camera review. In terms of size, this sits in between the Micro Four Third and the S1, the S1R and the S1H size. I think this is perfect size. I always felt that the Panasonic, in fact, that was the first mirrorless camera which actually beat or never cared about this, the whole belief of mirrorless should be small, etc. The S1 came with, decent. It was a big size camera, so I felt pretty nice, pretty comfortable holding that camera in, when it came out, and I even expressed that in our video. This is slightly smaller than that, but stays perfectly in your hand. Very well balanced. The grip is fantastic. Everything is very nicely placed. Great build too. Now, that's something which I really like about Panasonic. They are built like a tank, and I said that about the S1 too. I have held and used the S1R. I've shot a little bit with the S1H. A couple of very close associates shot extensively with it, and they were extremely happy. Now, this camera has almost all features those cameras have at a much lower price point. The kit comes with a 2060. It's a new lens, a 2060 with a micro feature in it. That's the lens. It's got a fully articulating screen. It's got everything else in the right position, and of course a dedicated video function button. Everything else seems to be perfectly in place. I like the way the exposure compensation, ISO and white balance is right next to the trigger. Then of course you have two toggle buttons which are customizable, programmable. So 1, 2 and 3, these rotary wheels can be programmed to suit your convenience. Usually it's aperture, shutter speed and ISO, so you can do that according to your convenience. And of course you have a joystick at the back and a very conveniently placed focusing mode selection switch and a drive selection switch, which are, I think it is is very, very thoughtful. Also a programmable AF switch and a quick button. So most of the people, I'm sure, will resort to the Q menu, the quick menu, to select the functions. Of course, it's got two card slots, both SD. One takes the type 1 and the other one takes the type 2. So make sure that if you're shooting photo to 10-bit internal, which this camera can do, or a high-speed shoot, you will require a good write speed. So try and, definitely use the top slot for your SD Type 2 card. So that's very, very important. You must remember that. And of course, on the other side, standard HDMI, USB, and of course your mic and your headphone connections. The HDMI is the mini one. Well, lots of people prefer the full-sized one, like the one they have in the S1H, but the size of the camera has come down, so something has to definitely be compromised, but I suppose that's what happened here. Okay, now coming around to the top dial, very well laid out again. I think I told you in the beginning that it is very, very clear. You can't really go wrong. You know exactly what each dial and each button is meant for. The one on the left, of course, is not labeled. There's only icons there. Basically, it's for still photography. Now, we shot some stills in reasonably complicated kind of lighting, dapple light, which means you have very bright spots and shadow area and mid-range and skin tone and color and all that. The camera, behaved very well. Now, acquiring focus, that is one area where the Panasonic has been lacking a little from ever since their first, S1 came out. Everyone loved their camera, the color, details, everything, both in stills and video, but the focusing, in fact, the speed in which the focus was acquired or shifted was a little doubtful. That probably because the type of focusing technique or mechanism which they have employed it here. So you must know that while getting into the shot or getting into the shoot rather, you must know what the product is capable of. So now they don't have any big claims about, you can go and shoot a skiing competition or a motorbike event or something like that. They've not made any such claims. So you should know where you're taking this camera to. This is definitely for relaxed shooting. Like I was telling you in the beginning, they came from an entirely different backdrop altogether, where image was everything. The quality of image was everything. Acquiring focus was achieved manually. There was somebody else who was doing it because they came, like I've told you, they came from a professional video background. So quality of the image was everything for Panasonic. I think that may be the reason why, in spite of the technology being available, they are still a little hesitant to kind of, adapt to, let's say, dual pixel kind of focusing technology. They may be other reasons which I don't know. I'm just assuming that this may be the reason. Now, this also shoots high resolution still. Basically, it takes advantage of the IBIS which is present in the camera to move the sensor around by 1 pixel. It shifts by a pixel and take 4 different shots, stitch them together and give you one very high resolution raw image. So you get a raw image of 96 megapixel. Okay, there is no increase in the angle of view. It will be exactly the same angle of view that you're shooting, but it'll give you 4 times heavy file with more information in it. Well, one thing that you need to be careful about the fact that this needs to be on a tripod, because you can't possibly move the camera around while doing that shot. You can also have at one mode, you can also choose the focus in post. So it actually takes again multiple shots and stacks them together, and in post you can decide which focus you want to retain. It also has a fantastic macro lens built into it. So 20 mm is nice and wide. You can do your group shots, because in India cameras are pitched predominantly towards the wedding photography market. All right, the remaining people are the kind of people who go by, you know, their own decision. They do a lot of research, whereas wedding photographers go by trends. You know, this is what I have seen. They go by what their peers are doing, what is in popular, what is in demand, or what is latest. That's how the wedding photographer by and large buy a camera. Whereas an enthusiast or a professional, or let's say a serious amateur, go by, he does a lot of study and then he arrives upon a particular product based on his real needs. So for a wedding photographer, let's say 20 mm is perfect for wide angle shots. Landscape photographers, perfect. Landscape photographer, the high-res shooting will be again a great boon. And the 60 is a good portrait lens. Now, as you go tele, you know, if you go towards 80 and 100 and 135, you see your subject becoming, because of the compression, start becoming a little fatter, you know, or a little bigger. The cheeks become a little, you know, wider and all that. But at 60, which is not wide nor tele, and of course if you are an influencer, someone wants to shoot a lot of stuff for their Insta or Facebook or stories and stuff, it's got pre-inbuilt format. So you use that and it gives you 1:1 and 3:2 and 4:3 and 6:9 cropped images. So that's another very interesting feature. Now the video features. That's where this camera really shines. This has a lot of features which the elder brother, the S1H, has in it. To start with, it can shoot 4K 60p internally. All right, it can shoot 4K 422 10-bit up to 30 frames internally. Well, that's actually very good. 422 10-bit internally is big, and it allows you to shoot without any heating issues and shoot simultaneously into 2 cards, which is, I think it is very good feature. And they also have given you a dedicated switch to the slow-mo features in case if you want to go to, let's say, 120 and 180 etc. in full HD. And of course the 4K 60p also is available only under S and Q. The regular movie mode will give you only up to 30p. The 2 important functions in this camera, which actually takes this camera to a different level, is the availability of Vlog and the availability of dual native ISO. Native ISO is the ISO in which you must be shooting your videos. Okay, so this camera has two native ISOs. One is at 400, the other one is at 4000. So look at the gap. If you are in bright outdoors and you want to shoot using Vlog, 400 ISO, and if you're indoors and you want to shoot at lower lighting conditions and Vlog, 4000 ISO. And of course, we also carried a variable ND filter to control the light further and to stay with that 1/50th of a second and the aperture of my choice. Another interesting professional video feature which Lumix has built into the system is the Anamorphic D Squeeze. All right, Anamorphic is a different way of shooting. Of course, again, time is limited, but it's a different set of lens. Professionals use it. So the cinemas or the Hollywood and all the rest of the world, when they shoot serious features, they use an anamorphic lens. Now, anamorphic is actually shot on a Super 35mm frame, which is close to our APS-C. Now, what they do is they squeeze the image sideways into the frame. So if you look at the image, you will see everything kind of elongated. Now the lenses are also known by the squeeze factor. So it is 1.3, 1.33 times. You know, they basically that's a squeeze factor. Now, when you mount an anamorphic lens onto, let's say, a Panasonic camera, you can in fact mount anamorphic lenses onto any mirrorless cameras, any cameras that it can take, but you will see what the lens is seeing, right? That's where S5 is going to make a difference for you. So you can go into the setting menu, dial in the squeeze factor and say D squeeze, and in your viewfinder, you will be able to see a proper de-squeezed image with top and bottom nicely kind of bracket. Mind you, it is not cropped. You are looking at a full frame full of image without any digital cropping, but you will see it the way you will see eventually on the screen. All right, so that is another interesting professional feature too. Now, there are few more professional features which Panasonic has built into this camera. The first one is you can use a gray card and take a reading from that particular position. Gives you perfect exposure reading. One, it will allow you to use a scope when you're shooting in controlled condition. Now, we all as still photographers know how to read an image using a histogram, but the videographers understand the light very differently. For them, the scope is what they prefer. Well, ideally, a cinematographer, even we as hybrid shooters, must learn how to read the scope. We used that and we got fantastic results. Now, this camera also interprets the parameters in 3 different ways, okay? One, for a still photographer. So for us, it's 1/50th of a second, the ISO and the shutter speed. But for a cinematographer, they understand shutter speed as degrees. So for them, something which is equivalent to 1/50th of a second or 1/48th of a second is 180-degree shutter angle, okay? And you can set this camera so that a cinematographer, in case if he happens to or she happens to use this, will be able to read or set the camera perfectly well, because shutter speed is slightly alien to a cinematographer. So they prefer to set the shutter speed using shutter angles. And if you are from a television backdrop using video cameras, of course, you have decibel settings, dB settings also available in this. So, all these features put together makes this camera a really professional. Not many other hybrid cameras can really boast of these features. So kudos to Lumix for packing in all those professional features into this camera, and also keeping it cool. Very important. Okay, few interesting features which is currently available only on 1920 1080 are called the live cropping. If you are in a situation where you want to zoom into something, you can do it digitally without losing resolution. That's the most important thing. So you can select a beginning point and an end point. Make sure the camera is stationary on a stand and the camera zooms in. It'll feel like a track or a dolly movement, but you will see no difference in the angle of the camera. Live cropping can be used to zoom in to an object. It is not zooming, it's live cropping. And also track it sideways like a slider movement. You give 2 points in your viewfinder, a beginning point and end point. Start the camera and it'll just follow that automatically. That's a very, very clever feature built into this camera, and can be used in case if you want to. Also, of course, full frame APS-C, and interestingly, there is a pixel to pixel ratio also is available, which means it will actually shoot exactly the same amount of pixels that is required for a 4K DCI output. So, which is good, but of course, it will crop reasonably well into your camera's sensor. So like I told you in the beginning, we took the camera out on a shoot. We shot in complex lighting conditions, tricky lighting conditions, and let's take a look at the video and the stills. So what do you think? I keep asking this question because it's very important. What do you think is very important for us? Of course, as far as we are concerned, we really liked using this camera. Great grip, great body design, great layout, amazing image quality, right? You saw the dynamic range and the colors of both the stills and the video. I don't know if I mentioned, the Viilage can actually give you 14 stops of dynamic range, which is like amazing. Well, the only place where I thought, which is a non-fact, is that the speed in which the focus was acquired was a little bit of a suspect. We tried setting the camera to the quick mode, but there are times it had its own mind, okay? There were times when it was holding onto the focus or acquiring the focus like very fast. There is something, I mean, this guy has a mind of its own. If you're into serious filming, I would definitely say use manual focusing, use a follow focus mechanism. That's what I would advise. In still photography, I don't think this is a camera that you will want to take to a football game or let's say a skiing competition, but perfectly suited for street and perfectly suited for landscapes. Brilliant for wedding because the colors are amazing. Well, people talk about a lower resolution viewfinder. Didn't really bother me much. The colors were nice. All the informations were there. In fact, you can select. I mean, in fact, you can put so much of information onto the the screen that you can really crowd the screen. So all those functions were available. So we really like it. Now, is that focusing, the slowness in focusing, is that a big problem? I would say yes and no. I would actually say that you should actually know what equipment to buy depending on your actual use case scenario. If you are going to a racing ground, buy a racing bike, right? You are definitely not expected to take a touring bike to a racing track, right? What we usually do, I think I mentioned in the beginning, is that we take a wrong bike to a racing track and also drive across the track, inviting all forms of trouble. And at that point, blaming the equipment is probably not the right thing to do. So know what you require and buy exactly what you require. I don't think you should go by what your neighbor or your friend or whoever is saying. Touch, see it, use it, believe it, and then acquire it. In terms of its still photography capacity and in terms of its filming capability, this camera delivers real top-notch quality. The only thing I would say which is preventing this camera to become the most desired camera is undoubtedly its focus. And if you're someone who's interested in learning photography, of course, Pixel Viilage has a website where we have some of the finest photography mentors teaching photography online for you. Well, log on to www.pixelvillage.com to know more. Bye for now. But मुझे लगता है Panasonic is such a big tech giant. I'm sure they'll bring it soon. Either buy a firmware upgrade or probably, changing it. In either way, I mean, they must do it. There is no two ways about it. That's what I think. Huh? What do you say, Aditya?
I think so. Solid.